Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning if you're joining us from out west. Welcome to the fifth webinar in the 2024-2025 FCM Collective Series. Today's session is entitled Advancing Transit Standards, a Collaborative Approach. My name is Evan Clark, and I'm the Manager of Partnerships and Sponsorship at FCM. I'm pleased to welcome our presenting partners and subject matter experts from CSA Group and Direct Solutions, who will be speaking about how standards can support municipalities to enhance the efficiency, safety, and sustainability of transit systems. As FCM moves forward with our commitment to reconciliation, I want to acknowledge that FCM's head office is located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. As an organization, FCM endeavors to unlearn our colonial mindsets and practices, grow in knowledge, and adapt our ways of working. As we continue to build meaningful relationships, we recognize the historic and ongoing contributions of Indigenous peoples and honor their leadership and partnership in shaping and strengthening our communities across the country. I encourage you to acknowledge the land you are joining us from. Before I turn things over to the experts, I have just a few housekeeping items to mention. L'interprétation simultanée est disponible pour notre session aujourd'hui. Pour accéder à l'audio en français, il faut simplement cliquer la petite icône du globe vers le bas de l'écran et à la droite et sélectionner le français. If you do not select a language, you will hear the live audio in English. Je vous donne quelques secondes pour faire le choix de langue. If you would like to ask a question today, please post your questions in the chat, and if time allows, I will help facilitate a brief audience Q&A by polling your questions. Finally, please note that this session is being recorded and will be available on demand on the FCM website. Today, we're here to discuss the current state of transit infrastructure, the challenges faced by municipalities, and the innovative solutions being developed to address these and many other transit-related issues. Buckle up as today's speakers explore the role of CSA in developing and implementing transit standards, key challenges and opportunities in transit infrastructure projects, the importance of accessibility and inclusivity in transit systems, and how standards can help improve the delivery of major transit and passenger rail projects. Joining us will be Derek Hansen, Vice President of Direct Solutions. Direct is a leading global advisor on investment and business strategy for transportation and logistics clients. Derek is the chair of CSA's Strategic Steering Committee for Transit and Passenger Rail and has recently accepted the role as chair of the Technical Committee for Climate Resilience in Transit and Passenger Rail. Derek oversaw the operations and development of a large fleet of battery electric buses and was the project lead for the Alberta Zero Emission Hydrogen Transit Project, where the first hydrogen fueling station and hydrogen fuel cell buses were deployed into service in the Edmonton region. Leading us off today will be Anna Maria Tomlinson, the Director of Strategic and Cross-Sector Programs within the Standards Division at CSA Group. In her role, Anna Maria leads the implementation of new sector and cross-sector programs, focusing on establishing sustainable, impactful standards development initiatives that improve safety, health, the environment, and economic efficiency in Canada and beyond. Anna Maria has been with CSA for 11 years, and she holds a PhD in chemical engineering with the University of Edinburgh and a Bachelor of Applied Science and Engineering from the University of Toronto. Over to you to get us rolling, Anna Maria. You are muted.
Okay. Thank you so much, Evan. Hopefully you can hear me now. Okay, I did such a good job of hiding my control panel that I couldn't find the unmute button. So thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you to FCM for having us here to speak with you at this FCM webinar. So as Evan mentioned, I'm Anna Maria Tomlinson. I'm the Director of Strategic and Cross-Sector Programs at the Canadian Standards Association, or CSA Group. And I lead the establishment of our newest sector in standards development, which is focused on transit and passenger rail. To get us started, I'll provide a very brief overview of CSA Group and who we are as an organization. CSA Group is Canada's largest accredited standards development organization. We are a not-for-profit member-based organization, and we were established in 1919, so we've been around for over 100 years. We are accredited by the Standards Council of Canada and by the American National Standards Institute, which means that we're able to develop accredited standards in Canada and in the United States. We have over 14 different areas of focus, and we work with over 11,000 dedicated volunteer members to develop the standards, over 3,000 standards in place. There are two sides to the CSA Group organization, two divisions. One is the Standards Development Organization, which looks after the development of standards, also conducting research to support our standards activities, developing educational tools, and conducting advocacy work. And then we have our commercial subsidiaries, which entail testing, inspection, and certification services. And of course, at our core, we're continuously focused on delivering societal good through the breadth of standards that we develop. The mission of our Standards Development Organization is to enhance the lives of Canadians through the advancement of standards in both the public and private sector. We are a leader in standards research, development, education, and advocacy. And the technical and management standards developed by our 11,000 members help improve safety, health, the environment, and economic efficiency in Canada and beyond. I've largely covered a lot of this content, but just to give you a sense of the breadth of work that we conduct at CSA Group, the 14 different areas of focus that are mentioned on this slide here include standards in the construction and infrastructure space, environment and natural resources, electrical standards, occupational health and safety standards, and now most recently transit and passenger rail standards as well. Now, the Standards Development Organization focuses primarily on standards development. That is where the largest amount of effort is conducted. And this is done in order to develop standards that address safety, health, protect the environment, and support economic efficiency. However, we do also have a research branch through which we invest in the development of research in order to explore the potential for new standard solutions, and also collect the evidence that's needed in order to inform the development of new standards or to update existing standards. Our education team is dedicated to providing access choices based on user needs, and also to help increase user knowledge of our standards and to guide the accurate interpretation and use of our standards within their intended settings. Through our advocacy work, we strive to drive public awareness of our standards and promote the value and use of our standards through their intended audiences. Now, as a standards development organization, we're often asked, some fundamental questions such as what are standards and why are they valuable? And this is really important to visit time and time again, because standards work behind the scenes, and they're not often well known or well understood by all audiences that we interact with. So in a nutshell, standards are documents that provide minimum requirements for the use, safety, performance, or design of products and services. They're non-biased and trusted documents because they're developed by groups of technical subject matter experts with balanced representation from across different interest groups, all of which follow a consensus-based approach towards the development of standards. They are developed using a robust, accredited process that further adds credibility, and they're living documents, which means that they can be updated. They are regularly updated and reviewed in order to reflect new practices and new technologies and ensure that our standards meet the needs of industry. Now, standards are particularly valuable tools because they are recognized benchmarks and they can be used to demonstrate good practice. And that's useful whether you're trying to demonstrate good practice to consumers or investors. And it's valuable not only for established processes and technologies, but they can also be a game changer in supporting innovation. They also provide consistency, clarity, and transparency, which helps reduce risk and uncertainty for any organizations that are working with them. And so when we're talking about the transit and passenger rail sector, we recognize that safety, quality, performance, and consistency are critical in enabling the growth of the sector, and this is where new standards will be fit. So with that introduction completed, I'm now going to focus on our newest sector, which focuses on transit and passenger rail standards development. And so when we set out to establish this sector, specifically within CSA, and I should, also take a moment to recognize that we have developed standards in the past that are used in the transit and passenger rail space. But up until recently, we didn't have a dedicated standards development sector specifically focused on transit and passenger rail. However, there were some key drivers that inspired us to make this change within CSA and establish this new sector. First of all, we saw new investments in rapid transit and passenger rail infrastructure, but also we saw a lot of challenges associated with some of these major projects being carried out across the country, whether there were construction costs, cost overruns, project delays, and so on. We also saw that climate change was starting to be an important factor. It was receiving increased focus in terms of public transit supporting decarbonization of the transportation sector. And so topics such as railway electrification, transit bus fleet electrification, hydrogen fuel cell buses, all of these topics were gaining a lot of attention, and they were, very innovative technologies that required a standardization framework to support them. And then last but not least, we also learned that, the focus on meeting the needs of consumers and improving ridership is of utmost importance to transit agencies right across the country. And so topics such as accessibility and inclusivity, wayfinding and signage, as well as safety, were garnering a lot of attention and focus amongst organizations in the space. And so our new transit and passenger rail standards sector strives to advance safe and reliable transit systems that underpin sustainable communities and a net zero future. And we encompass standards that apply to paratransit and specialized transit services, transit buses and shuttles, subways, as well as light rail, commuter rail, and intercity passenger rail. It's a fairly new program within CSA and has only been around for just over 2 years. So we do currently have 19 standards either published or under development, as well as 7 research papers, again, either published or under development. And over the next few slides, I'll highlight some of our work in 3 different areas of focus. Our transit and passenger rail sector has 6 main strategic priorities, which are summarized on the slide in front of you. The first is advancing safety and security across the transit and passenger rail sector, whether that's through safety management systems and ensuring safety and operation, or by developing standards and guidelines to ensure the safety and security of passengers and workers in the transit and passenger rail space. The second strategic pillar focuses on supporting the advancement of technology to decarbonize the transit and passenger rail sector. So this includes railway electrification, zero-emission bus fleets, and other technologies. The third pillar focuses on developing practices and procedures to help ensure accessibility and inclusivity. Transit is a service that's meant to be accessible and usable broadly by a variety of persons across urban and other settings. And so accessibility and inclusivity is of utmost importance. The fourth pillar focuses on informing safe and efficient design and construction and maintenance of transit infrastructure. We're also looking at advancing climate change adaptation and resilience across all sector assets and operation. And then last but not least, making sure that we're working collaboratively with other organizations in the space and with our own internal teams that might be developing standards in other sectors. So I'll first take a look and walk you through some of the work that we're advancing in supporting a transition to zero emission bus fleets. Now, in this space, one of the key areas of standardization that was flagged to CSA Group was looking at the maintenance facilities that are used to house new bus fleets, whether they might be hydrogen fuel cell buses, hybrid buses, or battery electric buses. Now, this is a topic that's of importance not only to the transit space, but perhaps to other organizations as well that may have large fleets that are transitioning to zero emission vehicles. And so a few years ago, we decided to begin the development of two keynote standards under our D401 series of codes. The first is the CSA D401.3 standard, which is a hydrogen vehicle and trailer maintenance facilities code. And the second is the CSA D401.4 battery electric vehicle fleet maintenance facility code. So both of these codes are intended to be used to inform the design and construction of new maintenance facilities for these types of fleets. The hydrogen vehicle facilities code is applicable not only to hydrogen buses, but also to hydrogen fuel cell locomotives. And the guideline includes, looking at vehicle maintenance facilities that are dedicated to maintenance, repair, or storage of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, as well as hydrogen tube trailers and tenders and ancillary areas and systems. And it really looks to provide a means to manage the risks that are associated with the maintenance and repair of these types of vehicles. This document will be coming up for public review in the spring of 2025, which means that the draft will be available for a 60-day period on an online platform, and any member of the public will have access to this document and will be able to provide comments and feedback to the technical committee for their consideration. The second standard, the B401.4, which looks at battery electric vehicles maintenance facilities, again, is a similar document, but focusing on battery electric vehicles, looking at maintenance facilities or depots that are used for parking, maintaining, repairing, or storing these types of vehicles. And similarly to the hydrogen version, it looks to address design, construction, and operation of these types of facilities, including recommendations for electric shock or arc flash control, facility fire detection and suppression, deflagration, and emergency response. And again, this document is also coming up for public review in the spring of 2025. Okay. In the next section, I'm going to talk about some of the training courses and certification programs that we have developed to support the adoption of zero emission buses. So while we have developed a number of standards in the hydrogen space, some of which are useful in the transit setting, we've also developed many training and certification programs to ensure that those working with hydrogen systems have the required knowledge and understanding to do so safely. So the first one on the list here is the Canadian Hydrogen Installation Code Essentials, which was launched in 2023. And the purpose of this online course is really to foster understanding and practical application of the Canadian Hydrogen Installation Codes as it relates to installation requirements for hydrogen storage containers, dispensing equipment, piping systems, and other related components. The second is a hydrogen service and maintenance fundamentals course, which was launched in 2024. And this course really provides a pathway to gaining relevant skills and baseline knowledge to safely work with hydrogen systems, including standards for scheduling, planning, executing, and documenting hydrogen system maintenance and services. Our hydrogen fuel cell systems inspection training launched in 2024. And this course provides pre-qualified technicians and mechanics with training in the inspection of compressed hydrogen gas containers, which results in learners being able to understand and apply the requirements of the code. And we also have a complementary FSI certification program, which is used for certified personnel, which will have demonstrated proficiency in inspecting CHG vehicle cylinders and fuel systems. And so this program also launched in 2024. And the links will take you directly to the courses on our store. In the EV space, similarly, we also have a number of training courses that are available The first looks at electric vehicle energy management systems, which enables engineers, electricians, and technicians to apply our EMS standard, as well as the Canadian Electrical Code Part 1 requirements, to the design, construction, and installation and inspection of electrical equipment. The second course listed here looks at high voltage electric vehicle certification. So we have one course that was launched in 2024 for EV automobiles, and we have a third course, another certification program dedicated to truck, transport, coach, and transit buses, which will be launched very soon. The intent here is for these certification programs to form, a means for practitioners to be able to demonstrate that they have the requisite knowledge, skills, and ability to conduct various job tasks and functions related to working safely in high voltage settings. And it's a way to indicate to potential employers that you do have all of the required skills and training to be able to complete these tasks safely. So these courses, again, one is already available, and the one for transit coaches and buses will be available shortly. Okay. I'll now transition and talk a little bit about our work in the area of climate resilience. CSA Group has been working in the development of standards for climate resilience for many, many years across many different sectors, including construction and infrastructure, electrical, etc. And very recently, we started to look at how can we best address climate resilience in the transit and passenger rail space. The first step that we took was completing research, and we have a published research report that looks at climate change resilience and adaptation for public transit. This particular document is provides an overview of the different risks associated with climate change and extreme weather events in the transit and passenger rail sector. And it also provides a summary of some of the best practices that are available for addressing some of these risks. Following on from the publication of this research report, we decided to pursue funding towards the development of 2 new national standards of Canada on climate resilience. Both the projects that you see on the screen here are being funded by the Standards Council of Canada. The first is the CSA D700 standard on climate resilience for transit and passenger rail. This standard will include, it will be a 2-part standard. It's currently under development, and Derek Hansen is the new chair of that technical committee. And this standard will include a climate change vulnerability assessment protocol for transit systems, and also a set of recommended practices for reducing climate-related risks. The second standard that we will be initiating in the next few months will look at Canadian methods for the prevention of rail buckling and continuously welded rail for transit rail. And this particular standard will describe a set of best practices for how to prevent buckling at the infrastructure design and construction phases, as well as during operations and maintenance. And so it will identify, consolidate, and refine some of the existing best practices in this space, and will also integrate more recent research findings from research that we know is already underway on this topic at the National Research Council. Okay, and the third and final kind of snapshot that I wanted to provide for you today is focused on the efficient building of major transit rail projects in Canada. And we believe that over the next few years, this project will require a significant focus from our team in order to build a new standards development framework for Canada to address some of the challenges that we see arising in this space. Now, building more transit is absolutely essential to achieving many of Canada's key objectives, including climate change mitigation, adaptation, resilience, improved housing affordability, equitable access to opportunities, and the list goes on. However, what we're seeing in Canada is that major transit projects cost more, take longer, and encounter more technical issues in Canada than elsewhere around the world. And so to dive a little bit deeper into the current problem at hand, we're seeing that major transit rail infrastructure projects in Canada require significant federal and provincial investments through tax dollars. These projects are absolutely central to addressing congestion in major urban areas and supporting regional economies. And numerous transit rail infrastructure projects in Canada have unfortunately experienced extensive delays and escalating costs. Major transit rail projects are facing challenges across key project phases, including design, construction, as well as testing and commissioning. And so what's the impact? Well, it's very simple. Unfortunately, Canada is building less transit than it could or should be building. We're also seeing operational challenges, including challenges related to safety and performance. And we're also seeing some deteriorating public trust as we're seeing these challenges kind of continuously impact projects right across the country. And so some of the preliminary consultations that we have conducted, as well as our collaborators at TRAX have conducted, is that the lack of relevant Canadian standards is a contributing factor to an efficient design and construction phases. This particular topic was flagged to us by our Strategic Steering Committee on Transit and Passenger Rail as being one of utmost importance for us to look at and determine how standards could support the space. And our very first questions then was, how can we, do we have some level of certainty or knowledge that really it's standards, the lack of standards that's contributing to this, to some of these challenges? And the response that we have been receiving through consultation so far is that, yes, the lack of relevant standards is definitely a contributing factor and is a major one that should be addressed. The standards that are currently used are really a mishmash of foreign standards that are not designed for Canada and Canadian standards that are not designed for transit. And a lack of national standards is adding risk, complexity, delay, and friction to the building process. And there are significant opportunities for us to draw on other international models that can be adapted to our specific needs. So in other parts of the world, there are very complex and comprehensive standards frameworks, and Canada can glean some of those learnings from across the globe. And so in order to advance work in this space, we have initiated 2 projects to date. The first is a research project that we'll be publishing by December 2025. The purpose of this project is to examine and describe the challenges that are being experienced across major public transportation projects in the Canadian market, conduct a review of the current regulatory and standards landscape that's governing transit and passenger rail projects in Canada, and assess what are the main causes for these challenges that are being encountered, and to what extent are they caused by a lack of standards and certification. And then finally, this research report will also include a list of recommendations for standards-based solutions to help tackle some of these challenges. We're also actively working on a public policy report that will be a companion report to the research, but it will largely be focused on the public policy dimensions of the problem. It will be conducted on a similar timeline, but it will be ready before our research project. And it will be focused on mapping the public policy dimensions of the problem and outlining a case for action, translating and contextualizing relevant research findings for a policymaking audience, and highlighting some of the policy relevant solutions. The aim here is to really empower policymakers to contribute to overcoming the challenges that these projects face. So in closing, I want to reiterate that CSA Group has established a new standards development sector to address a broad range of challenges and roadblocks within the transit and passenger rail space. I've highlighted 3 areas of work for you today, but there are many others that we're actively working to advance standards around. Research and standards development work is already underway across many standards substreams. And we have a large number of additional standardization gaps that have been identified, and I'll be happy to share some of those in the discussion portion of today's webinar. As an accredited standards development organization, we're able to support the transit and passenger rail industry by facilitating a robust, consensus-based standards development process And that's something that we're hoping will provide value and solutions to some of the greatest challenges that are being encountered in this sector. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention today, and I'd like to pass the baton along to Derek Hansen, who is the chair of our Transit and Passenger Rail Strategic Steering Committee and a member of a few standards development committees at CSA. So Derek, over to you. And
Thank you very, thank you very much, Anna Maria. It was a wonderful presentation, and I've had the absolute honor and benefit of working alongside Anna Maria for the past couple of years, and quite excited about the development of standards in the transit and passenger rail space and how that will benefit organizations such as ours and those that are on this call today. And I also want to thank FCM for this opportunity. And for those that are on the call, I'm well aware of many of the challenges that you all face working for a municipality, as I worked for the city of Edmonton for over 13 years, where I was transit fleet maintenance director, which led to a lot of the work that we're going to speak of today. So I want to, in this presentation, follow up to Anna Maria's, highlight some successful transit projects to kind of build on the momentum of some of the recent announcements, such as HFR, and as well talk about some of the pieces with battery electric, zero emission hydrogen vehicles and maintenance facilities, and where CSA's standards development will benefit those. So a quick overview of Direct Solutions. So we're a leading global advisor on investment and business strategy. Most of our team has come from the operations world, where we've got direct experience in rail infrastructure, as well as bus and zero emission transition, providing strategic advisory, consultancy, management services that support governments and transform businesses. This kind of gives you a view of some of the projects that we have right now globally. You'll see a presence in Australia, Middle East, Asia. I'll actually be heading to the Middle East here for the month of April, working on a project that we have there. Again, highlighting a lot of zero emission transition and rail infrastructure expansion projects globally. So I wanted to, hi.
Just quickly,
Yes.
would you like to share your slide?
Am I not sharing my slides?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry, everybody. My apologies for that. Okay, I'm going to go. Are we sharing now?
Yeah.
Okay, very sorry.
No problem.
Okay, I'll just quickly. Okay, here we go. All right. So during this time, I wanted to highlight some successful rail projects as part of this discussion today. And first, starting off in London, and I wanted to highlight recent projects. So this is the Elizabeth line, completed in 2022, and I wanted to highlight this specifically because it is a 41 step-free, fully accessible stations that ensure people with disabilities and those with mobility issues can easily access the line and travel throughout London. The line connects major employment centers, Heathrow Airport, and suburban areas, in improving access and opportunities to the inner city, capital, and beyond. Improved cross-river connections, provides better connections across the river, particularly around Abbey Wood Branch, which has seen an 11% increase in access to employment. I will then move on to the next one. And I really wanted to highlight this specific project in Australia, the Sydney Metro Northwest line. And the reason for that, going back to Anna Maria's previous comments, that transit projects in Canada seem for some reason to cost more, take longer, and have more technical issues. And we really have an opportunity to take from projects that have been successful around the world. So this Sydney Metro Northwest project was completed within budget and even finished 10 months ahead of schedule. Had an original budget of 8.3 billion Australian dollars and was a significant milestone in Sydney's public transit development, providing a reliable and efficient metro service to northwestern suburbs. We ought to be looking to case studies like this to realize how this particular project came in under budget and then apply those lessons learned to projects that we find in Canada. Here's another example of a recent successful project in Hong Kong, providing reduced travel times, convenient and efficient travel and access for many citizens in Hong Kong to be able to access the economic ties in the metro region in Hong Kong. The benefits and social benefits, economic benefits, and expanding transit projects. I can't emphasize that enough, and I'm probably speaking to the crowd here, but I think the point that I really wanted to drive home is how important these types of projects are, especially in light of a lot of uncertainty that is taking place in Canada recently, and sort of still having an eye on transit rail infrastructure expansion and how important they are to building out and advancing our economy and providing that level of sustainability within our country. And here's another example of a recently completed project in 2024, Riyadh Metro, offering numerous benefits. And if anyone's been to Riyadh, understands how expansive the city is, how difficult it is to actually navigate the city. Very difficult to get around without a passenger vehicle. And this is an example of, tying the citizens to the city, allowing more sustainable, reducing traffic and congestion. There's still a long ways to go, but again, making the city a more livable city and connecting areas of the city where people couldn't connect to previously.
Eric, I'm
Yeah,
just going to pull a question from the chat here really quick as you go
sure,
through some of these projects. There's just a
sure.
question about what energy sources each of those projects is using.
I can go back on some of them. I mean, a lot of them are using diesel, but they are the rail infrastructure is moving towards zero emission projects. So there are examples of um, electric rail in some of the projects, but I'd be happy to after to follow up with that question and go through each project and some of those specifics. I saw Mark Salzberg on as one of the participants here, and I wanted to highlight something that Anna Maria spoke to earlier about creating standards in transit and passenger rail expansion. So in Montreal in early February, there was a collaborative effort between CSA and TRAX, really kickstarting and initiating the idea of collaboration in initiating standards and policy solution for major transit and passenger rail infrastructure projects in Canada, looking to mitigate the challenges of these projects costing more, taking longer, and mitigating the technical issues that we face. And there has been this constant realization that the rail infrastructure projects have continually been over budget and delayed. So this is quite exciting. Now I'm going to speak to some of the zero emission bus projects that we've been involved in as well. First highlighting this project in the Philippines. This was a transport and e-mobility project at the core of the city to transition the quality of transport options within the Philippines. So we were appointed as a technical advisor for the development of and detailed business case for the introduction of new battery electric buses. This included pre-feasibility studies, local public transport route planning, and site assessments for zero emission buses, and including identifying requirements for upgrading existing infrastructure, concept design of electric and charging equipment, and development of charging and operational strategies, and a comprehensive roadmap to implementation. Again, I want to highlight that this was a successful project, and we've had some municipalities across Canada that have started this transition, and we need to continue on that momentum. This particular project in New South Wales, Australia, involved more of a hydrogen piece. So at this time on this project, we're appointed a technical support for a Singapore-based bus metro operator with the development of its tender and service contract, including an operational review of its service model, delivery model, the tender strategy. We developed their hydrogen strategy, as well as the planning and scheduling of bus services, providing to efficient planning. And we did a technical and commercial review and provided a solution to that. Now, I wanted to bring in some very personal experience. So this is prior to CSA standards with the City of Edmonton. We were successful on some funding for hydrogen fuel cell buses, and I had the opportunity to lead the Alberta Zero Emission Hydrogen Transit Project, where we deployed two hydrogen fuel cell buses, and in collaboration with a number of partners, including Suncor, H-Tech. The first hydrogen fueling station was built in the region. So we had the task of finding a place to store and do maintenance on our hydrogen fuel cell buses. And these are pictures of Ferrier Garage, which is a facility that was built in 1975, which then had renovations in 86 and 2020. But this was basically an abandoned paint booth that we then endeavored to convert into Edmonton's first hydrogen maintenance bay. And at the time, we had some codes to rely on. There was the Natural Gas Vehicle Maintenance Facility Code. We had national building codes. We had the BNQ Hydrogen Installation Code, but there wasn't a Canadian standard at that time for us to go to refer to. So we spent a lot of time with our consultant teams debating the standards that existed internationally. And I can say that had standards existed at that time, we probably would have spent a lot less time doing what we did and less money. We did learn a lot from this project, but this all leads to what Anna Maria was speaking to earlier about the importance of these standards developments. And in this case, the CSA B01, B401.3 hydrogen maintenance facilities is going to public review soon, will be a vital document to support transit agencies across the country in their transition to hydrogen vehicles, as well as the B401.4 battery electric maintenance facilities. And in speaking to the newest technical committee on climate resilience for transit infrastructure, the success of these standards has led to the opportunity for future standards development. So as this momentum continues and the importance of these standards and the realization of these standards and their importance is highlighted by the success of the projects, and will make it easier for municipalities across Canada in their energy transition into the future. And that's all I had for me. So I wanted to thank everybody for the opportunity of speaking today.
Hey, thank you so much, Derek. Evan, we'll count on you to kind of stop us if there are questions in the chat. But I'm sure Derek and I can chat a little bit while those questions come in. So Derek, I think you did a great job of, highlighting your experience both with Direct Solutions and also with City of Edmonton. And I was wondering, now having been involved in the transit and passenger rail standardization world, can you tell us a little bit about the value that you feel that standards can bring to transit agencies as well as to private organizations in the transit sector, and how those might be similar or different?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, going back to the points that we both talked about in terms of project timelines, project management, and having, that reference document to go back to, and all projects across Canada they cost a lot of money to do. We know that. It's what's actually preventing sort of full scale adoption versus, there are a lot of pilot projects taking place, but not a lot of full scale adoption. And really, reason for that is the costs. And with inflation, the costs are continuing to increase. So having those documents in place from the very outset of a project is vital in keeping the project on task, keeping everybody on the same page, and keeping the project within budget and allowing for, again, more scalability in terms of going forward.
Oh, absolutely. And we often, when we're looking at standardization, um, specifically for, whether we're looking at larger transit agencies or smaller transit agencies, there's a benefit to, kind of all organizations that are active in this space, right? For smaller transit agencies, they may not have the resources to be able to dedicate fully to something like, figuring out how to build a new maintenance facilities for zero emission vehicles on their own. It's a huge undertaking like Edmonton did. So being able to, bring together, a standard that can define, okay, here are the requirements that you should follow, to maintain safety and performance, then that can hopefully help them, implement some of these newer technologies with more ease. And then likewise, for some of the larger organizations, it's a risk mitigation strategy in some cases where you can point to the use of certain standards to be able to say, from a climate resilience perspective, we're reducing our risks as much as possible and we're following, this standard that kind of highlights the best practices for doing so in this area, right? And maybe that's, results in some, valuable insights for them as well. So hopefully, that we'll be able to continue to develop standards that are valuable to smaller and larger transit agencies across Canada.
I think you make a really good point, and it's sort of utilizing the expertise that is out there and relying on the resources that are available, and where there are maybe smaller municipalities or agencies that don't have the number of resources that some of the larger agencies have. This has created a really robust set of standards to assist you there. And I think this has led to other conversations within our committee work, such as, is there a specific standardization or specification of a bus, for example, that we can sort of look at building out a standard for to keep costs down. And I know on the City of Edmonton side, a lot of our large costs in terms of our bus procurements were related to City of Edmonton specific details with the vehicle. And I know at the time, we felt we were more special than anyone else around the region. But I think when, post pandemic, where we really saw some inflationary rates go up on parts, for me specifically, in Edmonton, our parts increases on the bus side were somewhere around 23%. And so if we can find opportunities where we can rely on a specific standard and maybe, give up some of our specialness in terms of how special we feel or what specifics need to be out there for our specific agencies, there might be ways to reduce costs in terms of our vehicle procurements, which then would also lead to better production line efficiencies as well, in terms of being able to deploy and roll out new buses off the production line. So I think there are a lot of opportunities that are through these standards developments that will support smaller agencies in particular going forward.
Yeah.
First question in the chat, if I may. So Steve Christie is wondering what the time frame for the development of a standard is. And I know a little bit about this process, but I think also the development of the standard is a really interesting component here too. What goes into that?
Certainly. I didn't want to dive into it completely because it can, once I get started, it takes me a while to get out of that particular space. But I can go through it very high level. So on average, we aim for to complete a standards in about 18 months, but it's really determined by how long the standard is, how many pages, how contentious the subject matter might be, and how much time do we need in order to be able to build consensus amongst the technical committee membership. And also how complex is the subject matter, right? So if you have a very technical engineering standard that might take a little bit longer to write than say a test method or something that's 10 or 15 pages in length. And so 18 months is kind of the target, but we can be a little bit quicker and a little bit slower depending on the subject matter. In terms of the development process, this is where, again, we follow our accredited standards development process that's set by the Standards Council of Canada. And, high level, we will learn about the need for a particular standard, whether it's from our own membership or through discussions with subject matter experts. We will validate the need for that standard by, first of all, doing a bit of a scan to see, are there other standards out there that already meet the need? Or are there international standards that we can learn from and perhaps use to inform the development of an actual standard? So we do our homework a little bit, because one of the things that we're required to do is avoid duplication of standards, right? That's something that no one wants to see. We want to make sure that if there is a national standard in place, then that's the one that will guide, the industry's processes moving forward. So once we've kind of validated the need, we'll issue a notice of intent to basically say, we intend to work on this project and kind of notify the public at large of our intention. We'll establish a technical committee of experts who will be charged with the development of that standard. And so in establishing a technical committee, we look for subject matter expertise. We look for balanced representation from different interest groups. So whether that's government interest and regulatory interest, whether that's industry, whether that's operator interest, whether it's public interest, and there could be many different groups that are involved, but they all need to have a seat at the table and have representation because we want all of those perspectives to be incorporated into the development of the standard. CSA's role is simply to facilitate the process, right? But it's the technical committee members that really hold the pen and that develop the content of the standard. Once we have a committee established, we'll develop kind of a first draft of the standard, and that will be provided to the technical committee to help them get started. And then we'll go through a series of content development meetings where the committee will meet, discuss, deliberate, bring forward ideas, challenge those ideas, bring forward data, information, whatever they need in order to develop and reach consensus on the content of the standard. Once they're happy with the content, we'll move to a public review phase. So you'll have heard of us kind of referring to public review for those two maintenance facility standards that we talked about. That's that 60-day period where our standards will be posted on the CSA Group public review website. Any member of the public can access that document, review it clause by clause, and submit feedback or comments for any changes that they wish to see in the standard. The technical committee then reviews that content, those comments. They have to review them all and disposition them. They don't have to agree, but they have to review them and determine whether they wish to make changes. And then once they've made any necessary changes following public review, we'll hold a ballot to formally upgrade the standard, and then we'll move forward to publication, following, of course, some internal checks and balances to make sure that we followed our primary process appropriately. And so that's kind of it from start to finish. The standard is a living document, meaning that, once the standard is published, the technical committee will review it regularly to make sure that, they're identifying any opportunities for improvement, or perhaps if the standard is no longer needed, they may decide to withdraw it at a later date. But, the standard doesn't just sit on the shelf. We do look at it periodically to make sure that it's up to date with the latest knowledge. So I hope that helps. And that's all the thumbs up.
I have a question. maybe this is me as a taxpayer or someone who appreciates transit projects and riding transit, but what are the factors that cause transit projects in Canada to cost more, take longer, and have more problems? And maybe by extension, like which of those factors would standards be a lever to sort of improve on?
I mean, that's a great question. And there have been many reports out there that kind of really dive into the cost challenges. So, I focus on this call to the work done by the Transit Cost Project. They look at many projects right across North America and kind of diving into some of those escalating costs and challenges associated with those. But from a standards development perspective, which is where our focus is, the challenge is that organizations are really working with a multitude of standards, sometimes hundreds of standards for a particular project. And in the absence of there being a single national standard on a topic, they are having to select from a menu of 10, 15, 20 standards to say which one is the most appropriate for use in Canada, which one is the most conservative, which one should we be selecting. And so this is a time-consuming process where subject matter experts need to study those standards, determine how they would play with our existing building codes and other regulations that we may have in place. And there may be some disagreement there between the organization that's charged with completing the project and the party that contracted that project out, right? Because those requirements are not clear. And there's that lack of clarity and that lack of a Canadian national standards framework leads to a lot of rework, a lot of reinventing of the wheel, and a lot of time spent in the studying of other national standards, standards not intended for transit and passenger rails, maybe standards intended for freight, being borrowed and used to fit what's needed for a specific project in Canada. That time alone, you can see how that can add up very quickly in terms of effort and costs for any given transit project in Canada. So that's the piece that we're trying to address through the development of standards to say, let us establish the standards that we know should be followed in Canada so that future projects are much more predictable in terms of what requirements need to be met and what will be acceptable to all parties involved in the completion of this project. And Derek, I'm sure you have other comments on this. I'll pass it over to you as well.
No, that was a great summary. I was just going to add change orders often will add significant costs, and so there's a lot of diligence that needs to go into the initial procurement documents, and these standards, as they develop, will assist in those initial procurements in terms of what is the agency asking for and then what is being delivered, and then ensuring that I'll just go back to using diligence, that diligence is done at the beginning, during the procurement, and during the evaluation stage, and how significant change orders can impact project costs and duration.
Thank you. I think we have time for just final thoughts from each of you if you'd like to offer something.
I'll leave it with Anna Maria for the last word. I'll just say that I think you've got people here who are obviously advocates for public transit, with an eye to continuing to advance public transit projects and their importance to the communities across Canada. And so the work that's being done is really going to support the advancement of those projects.
Thanks, Derek. I mean, from my side, I can just, first of all, thank FCM again for having us here today. I hope that this was useful to those of you on the line. And, although we only had time to cover a few of the topics that our team is involved in, I can share with you that we're looking into many others, ranging from accessibility and inclusivity, asset management, safety management for railways, on-demand transit. The list really goes on and on. Cybersecurity as well. Those are all topics that are extremely important in the transit and passenger rail space. And we're always listening, right? So if there are specific challenges that you are experiencing that you would like to see solutions developed around, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always keen to hear about these challenges and determine, okay, what can we do on our side to help develop solutions for those challenges. So yeah, bring us your pain points, bring us your challenges and ideas, and we'll be happy to chat.
Thank you, Anna Maria, and thank you, Derek. Thank you also to CSA Group for your collaboration and insights in support of today's session. The recording of today's conversation will be posted to fcm.ca in the coming days, so please feel free to share it with your colleagues and staff. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, join us after the summer break for our next FCM Collective webinar in September, when we'll be looking at municipal railway safety with our partners at CN. Be well for now, everyone. Have a great day.